Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
It's U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. Show your support by visiting U.S. Modernist's massive mid-century modern archives at usmodernist.org. On the show today, we welcome Los Angeles architect Barbara Bestor. And now, your host, the accidental archivist, George Smart.
Hi, folks. We had a wonderful time at Modernism Week in Palm Springs recently. Mm-hmm. Modernism Week is like the Super Bowl for mid-century architecture. It's all you can eat food and houses and tours and lectures and symposiums and furniture and clothing and art. I mean, if you're into this kind of stuff, it is the place you want to be. We took 25 people out for our annual tour, and one of them was our very own Tom Guile. What was it like, Tom?
It was great. It was, well, the weather's gorgeous, and then, you know, I sleep in later than I do at home to 8:30, and then it's breakfast, a bacon frittata, fresh waffles made right in front of me and then given to me. That's even better. Then there's always a nice guest speaker from Modernism Week who drops by to talk to us for the podcast. We take a little break, go to the private bar for a martini, and then we're once again reinvigorated. That's the word. We'll interview another guest, then lunch, then a nap.
Yes, nap is very important.
Yep, then more guests, more martinis, and then it's time to get dressed up and ready for some Hollywood-style party with hundreds of Modernist fans at an amazing house that night, or every night it seemed like. Then the next day you lather, rinse, you do it again.
And repeat.
It would make sure you have clean hair, that's for sure. It was a tough assignment, but George let me bring along Patricia, my girlfriend, who went touring the Modernism Week events, and now she really thinks I'm cool. Thank you, George.
You're cool, Tom.
Oh, thank you.
Support for U.S. Modernist Radio comes from Realtor Angela Roll.
In a story we are completely making up, Modernist design expert Angela Roll was out of money on the streets of Paris. She only had 5 friends: Brittany, a computer expert; Maybelline, mistress of disguises; Shannon, an acrobat and former MI5 agent; Baby G, a DJ with a mysterious past; and her Aunt Maud, who made lunch. Somehow, Angela masterminded a midnight heist from a 747 at Charles de Gaulle Airport, stealing a rare limited edition Ferrari right off the runway.
Scandalous.
Days later, driving through the streets of Monte Carlo, she was spotted by Detective Eric of Berlin, who distracted Angela with original Neutra renderings while impounding the Ferrari.
What a good trick.
He had business to do. As soon as she was about to steal it back, he proposed, and they wed.
I do.
The day of the Monaco Grand Prix. That's when they got married? Wow. Here in America, Angela uses her architectural training and quick thinking to specialize in modernist houses, advising buyers and sellers in everything from appropriate renovation to hot wiring a $200,000 car. Here's a tip. There's no wires anymore. It's all software. Angela Roll is your special modernist agent. Reach her at angelaroll.com. That's ROEHL, or call her at 919-995-0550.
We do a lot of research here at U.S. Modernist. In fact, our Catherine Westergaard Kramer has documented thousands of modernist houses, especially in Los Angeles. There is no house that cannot be found by Catherine Westergaard Kramer. You can see those at www.usmodernist.org/masters. One name that kept popping up in this research is architect Barbara Bestor. She is known for a robust commercial practice, including the Beats Electronics headquarters, the Nasty Gal headquarters, which I originally thought was a vodka, but it turns out it's something else, Intelligentsia Coffee and Tea, Ashes and Diamonds Winery and Event Center, and the Silverlake Conservatory of Music. She's taught architecture at Harvard, UCLA, and now the Woodbury School of Architecture as executive director of the university's Julius Shulman Institute. And if you don't know who that is, you should Google it to see all the amazing photos that Julius Shulman took of mid-century modern houses, primarily throughout the 20th century. Barbara is author of Bohemian Modern, Living in Silver Lake, and she's referred to as the unofficial mayor of Silver Lake. In 2017, she was elected to the AIA College of Fellows, which is like making the Baseball Hall of Fame. Way to go, Barbara. And finally, in a fantastic wedding venue that will make you super, super, super jealous, she married film director Tom Stern in 2015. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you so much. What a nice build-up.
I'm super, super, super jealous already.
So I don't know if you know this, Barbara, but you are a verb. I read a description.
Not know. To Bestor or to Barbara?
No, to be bestorized.
Oh, I see. That's funny.
And what does that mean?
I think it means when Barbara Bestor comes and works on your house or your project, it's been bestorized.
Oh.
I think
Well,
it's a good thing.
a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
It's like pasteurized, I guess. You heat it up to 1,000 degrees and make it
safe.
safe. Yes.
Healthier, sunnier,
Yeah.
and more colorful, I hope. Something like that.
Yeah.
So let's start with your super, super amazing wedding. Now tell us all while I weep where
I love that. Well, okay.
you got married.
Well, I was getting married. It was sort of a second time around for both of us, and we're very excited about it. And I was really struggling to find a good place to get married because, to be honest, my first wedding had been at the Schindler House on Kings Road, and then I had
you
the
poor
party
baby.
afterwards
Oh, your starter
at the Chateau
wedding.
Marmont when it was still kind of a more like down at the Gills type of a hotel before it was quite as glam as it is now. But yeah, so that was a pretty good first time around, and that was in the early 90s. So I was looking at these places, and then, this friend of mine, I was supposed to do this new house for a friend of mine who had been looking to kind of build something big, and I couldn't find enough land to build something. And then it turned out when I was on vacation, I got a call from the kind of realtor in the know around here for architectural, and he told me that
Crosby
Silvertop
Doe,
was
I
about
bet you.
to go. Yes, exactly. Crosby
Yeah.
called me, and I was out in Rhode Island. He's like, Barbara, I'm going to be listing Silvertop like in 2 days. Do you have anyone who's going to buy it? I was like, I do, as a matter of fact, because I think my friend should buy it because it's probably a good match for them, and we'll never find as much land, to build something new in the neighborhood. So, yeah, so I convinced my friend to get this house, and they had to kind of duke it out with a bunch of celebrity types who wanted to buy this house, and they did indeed get the house. And then we started working on it, but it was going to be a very long process. There's a lot of restoration and remodeling, and so right after the deal was sealed, they got the house, I was like, going to be getting married in a few months. Would it be okay if we, your house will be a construction site anyhow, can we kind of do it there? And they're like, oh, okay, I guess so. So they were very nice and let us have our wedding there, and it was pretty amazing.
And there were some great photos of your wedding I saw with all the guests laid out for dinner on the tennis court.
Uh-huh.
Just like around sunset and the sun's coming down. It's just gorgeous.
Yeah, and we did the ceremony in the front part of the house, which looks out sort of towards the ocean. And at the time, I'd rented this kind of mid-century furniture from this prop house in Hollywood. So we had these cool sort of Saarinen-type chairs, but everybody had to sit on this big, skanky ivy bed that had been there for a long time, but it was too much to take it out already at that point. So but it kind of worked. We sort of damped it down, and then everybody sort of crawled into their white leather chairs over some ivy, and hopefully no one got any bites or anything.
So you snuck in Silvertop and then just glossed past that. So tell our listeners about Silvertop and its architect.
Well, Silvertop is, I would say, the West Coast falling water. It's done by John Lautner. I would say it's probably his most important architectural project. It had been kind of not under wraps, but hadn't been seen that much by the public or published that much because it had this single owner from the early 70s till now, really, till my clients got it. And I think everybody, at least in Silverlake, kind of knew about it, and certainly Lautner people knew about it, but it just wasn't a place that was, there wasn't that many photographs of it. You couldn't really get in there that much. But it was this wonderful wild project where Lautner and the owner, he was commissioned by this guy, Ken Reiner, who had assembled, I think it's 5 building lots all together on the top of a hill in Silverlake, which was this kind of groovy Bohemian neighborhood. And Ken Reiner, I think he actually rented the Schindler House like about a block away and kind of settled in there for about a decade while they worked on this house. And he and Lautner went around the world to look at new types of construction, in particular concrete shells. Like they were looking at Nervi's work and other people on this kind of big world tour.
Thin concrete construction.
Yes, and particularly like the kind of, the shell structure where it's like relatively thin, steel mesh, and spanning a long distance without any
Nervi, Felix Kandela, Calatrava,
exactly.
some of that.
They went to
those
see
people.
It all. Yeah.
The Spaniards seem to have dominated that for a while. The Spanish and the Italians.
Spanish, Italian, and also there was that guy in Uruguay that did a lot of interesting stuff. So, but there hadn't really been much built that way in California, although it was around the same time that all the freeways were getting built. So I always kind of think of it a little bit as using like the language of infrastructure and kind of bringing it to other kinds of construction. Then, long span bridges and concrete freeways and stuff are using some of the same technology. So they built this house, and it took forever. It's sort of about, I think the permits or the original drawings are from the late 50s, and then construction there's a lot of cutting into the hill, and there's this amazing cantilever driveway that kind of goes in a circle around a cylindrical guest house that is also a retaining wall. And it kind of went on until the mid-60s, and then it was done as a shell, but the whole project kind of ended up just stopping because Reiner ran out of money, really. It wasn't the house per se, but it was the nature of his business. He was sort of a technology industrialist who had changed his factory from making aluminum for the World War effort into, he invented some hair clips and had made a lot of money on the hair clips, but various kind
it's
of
amazing
financial.
What a little thing like a hair clip can let you do.
I know. And well, the wonderful thing is too, on this house, he tried to write off the whole cost of the house as a industrial research. And there's an extended correspondence between him and the IRS. And he was successful in getting like a chunk of it written off because he was sort of looking at adapting the idea of these aluminum clips into things that could be part of domestic architecture. Like there's wood panels on the walls that are hung with clips. You can unclip them and get to the various pipes and electrical things that are behind them. So it's kind of seen as like a research. It is kind of a research house in that way, but it was kind of great to see someone trying to just deduct the whole cost of it too. Anyway, but so then it got put on hold, and then it was sort of abandoned really as a shell for about 7 years until the couple that lived down the street, this doctor and his wife, bought it, and they lived there until just a couple of years ago.
In the shell?
Well, it didn't have a kitchen, it didn't have bathrooms, it was missing a couple doors, so they sort of relatively inexpensively put
it really just was a
there.
skeleton of a house.
So they were kind of camping.
Well, I mean, a lot of the woodwork was there. I mean, it's an interesting thing. Like, I don't have photos of exactly then when they got it in the 70s, but it wasn't really complete, but it did have a lot of stuff. And it certainly a lot of its infrastructure, like say the really innovative heating system that hadn't really been made to work yet. That's something that we kind of restored and got going again. And there's a lot of cool stuff that needed like another year or two of kind of development and completion that just didn't end up happening in the mid-60s. So we were able, in the course of our work, to kind of go back and get those things going that were sort of part of the original intent.
Well, this is one house you've had a very close relationship with. There's another house, the Salkin House by John Lautner, that was off the radar for decades. In fact, a lot of people didn't even think it was built. But it came on the market, and the new owners hired you to do a renovation.
Yes, well, it's funny because we were working on both of these around the same time, and the the folks who bought the Salkin house is Trina Turk and her now late husband, Jonathan Scow.
Yeah, that's very sad. I met him.
Oh, God. Yeah, he was an amazing person. And they are, the way they put it once was like, we don't really have like heirs. You know, we figure like we're going to spend our kind of money on like taking care of houses in need. So I think that's kind of what they do. They have quite a few beautiful, or they amassed a collection of some really amazing architectural houses, including like the Hedgerow House up at Sea Ranch and their incredible house out in Palm Springs. But yeah, so the Salkin house had been sort of discovered in a way that, you know, now Curb, the online magazine, allows things to happen. Like it was called the Lost Lautner on Curbed, but it had been this rental house for maybe 30 years or something. I think the original owner, who I think the original owner was actually the great uncle of a friend of mine, it turned out, who had been this sort of kooky bohemian guy who had sort of the variety of modern dance people and whatever in his house. And it was sort of like a one-bedroom studio-size house. Like it's sort of the antithesis in terms of scale and even construction type to something like Silvertop, because it's an earlier house. It's all wood, very small footprint, but it had been added on to like this carport had been enclosed to make a couple bedrooms. It was sort of beset by mud flows. You know, every winter when it rained, all the mud on the hill would just kind of like sweep into the house and out the other side. So it had a lot of, let's say, euphemistically deferred maintenance issues. And so what
we've heard of deferred maintenance, haven't we, Tom?
Yes.
It comes up on this show all the time.
Yeah.
Does it? I know it's a big issue. I mean, but it's a kind of it's a very interesting one how people relate to that term. But anyhow, so in this case, we basically had to take off a ton of carbuncles that had been added onto it and work on the hillside drainage landscape issues to kind of get that to be rerouted so you didn't keep having this mud flow. And then one fun thing that happened, I mean, the house itself is an amazing structure. It's kind of very dramatic, expressive structure that makes it look like the whole thing is sort of like a gull wing cantilever, even though it isn't exactly really doing that. It's kind of a fun illusion if you look at the structural section of the house versus sort of how it reads. But anyhow, so that was sort of part of Lautner's great skill in creating like really impressive like sculptural / structural expressions without necessarily having to make them very expensive and using always, you know, it doesn't always have to be incredible materials. Like this is pretty pedestrian wood framing. Anyhow, so there's this great structural section, but then there's also this red floor, which you see all over Frank Lloyd Wright's projects, like in Arizona at Taliesin and stuff. And it's kind of like really beautiful terracotta red, but not tile floor. And we were able to find the original mixture that is still available that Wright used and that Lautner used, and it still exists. It's just people don't use it that much, I think, because it's a little more work. But basically, when your concrete floor is wet, you sprinkle this chemical on it, and it kind of goes through an oxidization process and gives it a color that's pretty much baked in. So it's like a really nice permanent flat color. Anyhow, so we were able to redo some of the floors where it needed to be patched with the same process that had been used in the 40s originally.
Well, let's go back in time a little bit. Well, what do you get when you cross an anthropologist with a college administrator?
I think you're talking about my personal history.
Yes,
huh?
Yes.
Well, the college administrator started out as a French professor.
Okay.
My mom's a German native who then had a master's degree in French, and I think one in German that wasn't really cut out for teaching, so she kind of ended up in administration. My dad, as an anthropologist, and the whole family actually on his side is sort of anthropologists and historians. I think anthropology and travel are good combos for architects to kind of come from, because really you're doing stuff for people, but you also want to like come up with some new stuff and get informed by like other options, like other ways to live than just what you already know. And you know, as a kid, I got to spend like a year in Portugal when I was 2 and did a lot of different kinds of traveling because of my mom's family and my dad's work. And I'm generally curious about, you know, what's it like to live here or there. Anytime, I'm one of those people, I'm sure you guys have the same thing when you go to some place you like, you're like, hey, I wonder what like a house around here costs. And,
right.
You know,
I have
in New Orleans or whatever.
My girlfriend likes to drop into hardware stores when we're
Oh, yeah,
traveling,
I
like
do that too.
other
Is
parts
she
of
an
the
architect?
world. Oh no, she walks my dog and she teaches school. But like we were in France, we were in Thailand, and she always wanted to make sure we went to a hardware store.
Well, yeah, but one of the best ones is that place Tokyo Hands in Tokyo. That's like the funnest. Big,
I've heard of
crazy
that
hardware
place.
store.
Never been there.
Yeah. I like paper goods stores too. Like it used to be like if you were in Mexico or Italy or something, you go to like a paper goods store and there's just all kinds of amazing handmade books and stuff like that.
So what about when you were in Germany? You made some little model boats?
Oh, yes. Oh, my gosh. Well, when I was a kid, I would go often and spend the summer in Germany with my grandmother in Stuttgart or in Bad Cannstatt, which is a suburb. And I would have a lot of time on my hands, and I would go. There was this park called the Cool Park or the Coolza nearby that had these really big, those kind of big fountains that are huge and flat and not so much. They look like a pond, but it's just sort of like probably like 12 inches of depth all the way across. And there were some people there who would build like these elaborate, model boats of some sort of sail schooner thing. But I would make a boat like every couple days, and my grandmother's out of like used, coffee containers and various things. And then I would just go and, walk over a mile or so to the park and then just work, messed around with my boat like or two every day. So I just really liked making three-dimensional things a lot. I made a lot of other stuff as a kid. Could have gone sculpture direction, kind of ended up going architecture direction. And then,
So how did you shift into architecture? Was it through the babysitting you did?
well, I did, I guess, where I grew up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, there was a weird concentration of architects as well, including a couple of families that lived across the street from me. So when I was younger and I was always working all kinds of part-time jobs, I ended up babysitting for a lot of architects. And I remember there was one family who I really did work for a lot. And like every Saturday night I would watch it was like The Love Boat and then Fantasy Island.
The
and then that would end,
Love
and
Boat.
Exactly. The plane. So that would, after that ended, I have another couple hours and I started reading architecture books, including history and theory stuff. Like there was this book called, I forgot, it's the one that Philip Johnson did about the 5 architects, like the
Harvard 5?
Yes. Until I just kind of started to get into this stuff and I started to learn more and more about it. So by the time I hit high school, I was pretty much telling everyone I was going to be an architect. And I just kind of didn't really change my mind.
So the moral of the story is be careful who you babysit for, because it might determine your career.
Right.
Well, definitely who you, like the different examples you see as you're growing up, I'm sure influence a lot of people to go like, oh, I didn't know you could be a writer, or I didn't know you could be an architect, or I didn't know you could be a chemist or whatever. Like it's a funny thing. Expose your kids to as many different career options as you can, I think.
So you then went on a great odyssey of wonderful academic institutions.
Yes, I was lucky enough. I was a good student in high school, and I went to Harvard for college. But again, knowing that I wanted to do architecture, which wasn't a topic you could major in there, I ended up in their visual environmental studies department, which is sort of the art department and everything else. And while there, I took a year off and went to school at this amazing place in England called the AA, the Architectural Association, this was the mid-'80s, so it was like a place that Rem Koolhaas was lecturing all the time, and Zaha Hadid had a show right when I got there, and Lebbeus Woods, and all these sort of thinkers of European modernism and contemporary architecture were kind of hovering around that place, and it was really wonderful. And while there, my friends there, and even Alvin Boyarsky, who ran the school, said, well, if you have to go back to the U.S. for architecture, make sure you go to L.A., because if you want to actually do something as an architect, you should go to California, because that's where people are actually building new ideas, and the East Coast, forget about it. This was in the postmodernism that was kind of reigning big in the East Coast at that time in America. So I took their advice, and after I graduated from college, I headed out to L.A. and went to SciArc, which was super great.
So I think of SciArc as sort of the Hogwarts for architects, a kind of magical, mysterious place where wizards are born.
And dragons?
Maybe dragons. I don't know.
Well, it is. I don't think there's any talking pictures on the walls, but there were a whole lot of different kinds of people teaching there and working there. And, LA almost had its own, strain of architecture in the 80s that started. That was they call it the LA School sometimes. But, we have all of the amazing mid-century and 1960s modernists, but we also have people like Frank Gehry and Tom Main and Eric Moss, all kinds of other ways of doing architecture that are pushing what is modernism. So it's always been an incredibly creative place for architecture and kind of like architecture and beyond.
All different kinds of design disciplines.
Yeah, and actually the AA was like that too. I mean, there's in my time since I graduated, the computer wasn't really a big thing when I was in school, but obviously since then there's been all kinds of new things in digital design that you can do that are virtual reality or augmented reality, as well as architectural renderings and modeling and ways of making architecture using software that allows you to build stuff that you couldn't have built before. There's all kinds of options opening up.
Are people still mourning the death of drawing, or have they gotten over that?
I guess I don't know that there's a sentimental mourning of drawing, although I will say I do think it's still a very valuable skill. I think the question as educators is how to balance it. I mean, a lot of the work that one does is essentially using, computer programs for drawing because of, how things are built and how things are transmitted. That is really efficient. But I think it's always a good and important skill for someone to be able to, if ever necessary, to sit down with a piece of paper and kind of sketch out an idea. I think that's a very useful ability. And I think even when I was running a grad school for a while, I was really struggling with how to balance that. How do you sort of educate people in terms of that skill at the same time as you're, encouraging them to try out all kinds of different software for representing ideas. I think lately I've seen a bit of a return to that even in the commercial marketplace, there's a real value on drawings and illustrations of ideas and renderings that are actually more looking like a hand-drawn thing that, Sir John Soane might have done, as opposed to it always being, the most computer-driven or computer-generated image.
Sterile, straight lines.
Yeah, well, the computers are actually better for the non-straight lines than anything else. I mean, that's the big reason for.
Yeah.
If you look at what's coming out of schools these days, to the extent a lot of it is kind of shaped and curved, it's because of what you can do in the computer to create and to once you've done one, to be able to replicate that in drawing and in model form, it's very useful.
So after SciArc, did you go directly into your own firm, or did you work for other companies?
I pretty much went into. I actually worked for many years as a partner. I did a bunch of joint ventures with a wonderful man named Norman Millar, so we weren't technically partners, but I had worked for him before, and I never taught with him, but we did a bunch of different projects together in the early 90s, and then I kind of went out on my own by the mid-90s, but we remained friends, and later on in life, he was the dean of the architecture school at Woodbury University, and he brought me in to be the chair of the new graduate program. That was in about 2008. So then we worked together for several years, and he, unfortunately, is another person that we lost recently, which is
I'm sorry.
Tragedy in architectural education, I think. But yeah, so I was kind of doing stuff on my own pretty soon out of school, and really, it's literally building furniture and doing home offices for Hollywood people at first, and then doing some little house remodels, and then finally getting to do some new houses, and then I used to do a lot of retail stores. And so I just had a kind of small but busy office with maybe 4 people for a decade or so before things started to kind of build up a little more.
Well, your resume and portfolio is really impressive. One of the houses I like a lot is the Duplass House 2006 in Silverlake.
Oh, yes. Yes. That is a house. It's a funny story because it was a friend of mine's writing partner, another Hollywood writer, had bought 2 lots or 2 houses together, one empty lot and one house, and wanted to build a new house. And I think it was right. I think they asked me to work on it, but I was at the time moving with my now ex-husband to the East Coast, and so I couldn't work on it. And so I said no, and then they did something with somebody else, and then I ended up getting divorced and moving back like a year or 2 later. And they called me. They're like, will you look at what we're about to build? We're not sure if we like it. And
We need some drawing repair.
Kind of. It was really like, can you fix this? And so and they already had a building permit, I think, but it was not a good project. So I kind of did this remodel. I think they'd actually already started building the foundation. So basically I had to remodel quickly everything above the foundation level, but keeping some of the structural basic concepts the same. And so that's actually, it was a really fun project. It was so fast to do that. It's quite a large house. Like it ended up being over like 5,000 square feet, but trying to really simplify the front elevation. And it has this main living room that was actually inspired, frankly, by Lautner, where it's lined in wood and has this huge glass window that pockets away, so that when you sort of slide this window away, it makes the whole room feel more like it's a big outdoor porch, because it kind of has like an indoor-outdoor feeling with the wood lining, but also the openness on both sides.
That was a very common feature of those mid-century houses in L.A.
Yes, and that is one of the best things. And what's interesting is like learning how to do that in a way where you really are working with the orientation of a site. Your north and south facing elevations are hugely important just because of our incredible heat gain that we're capable of here in the summer. So, learning a lot through experience, frankly, but about overhangs and how to kind of create that sense of openness, but sometimes you really have to have a very deep overhang so you don't actually have something that's, you have to wear your sunglasses during the day. Like that's the worst. You see that in some of the more straightforward kind of glass house type things. They're often like not, a lot of parts of them are not that livable, as the sun progresses during the day or the winter sun gets in your eyes or something. So
you move through the house to where it's comfortable.
People do that, or they keep their drapes down all the time, which is kind of sad.
Yeah, that's pretty sad. I wanted to ask you about a couple of other houses. I think you renovated the Roxy Roth house by Schindler at some point.
I worked on it. A friend of mine had bought it, and it was already in a very nice shape. But what I did was take this kind of weird, cool carport that Schindler had built, which was kind of like almost wasn't a tunnel, almost like a shed built against a cliff that kind of was a one-directional, like very skinny one-car garage. Like you'd enter on one side and exit the other side. And it wasn't pretty much useful for a car other than it was probably built for a Model T practically. It was an older house. So my client wanted to use that as a space to work in. And so keeping all of the existing structure, all I really did was fill in the open spaces. It was more of like a carport, I guess. So it had a lot of these big open chunks above the wall, but kind of turning the corner. So I had to figure out a way to get glass in there to create a thermal barrier so you could heat it, and then set in like an entrance and an exit so that it would not affect like the overall architectural reading of the space, but became like a useful enclosed space.
It was for sale recently. Do you know if it sold?
Yeah, it sold, and the owner was Susan Orlean, who just wrote that amazing library book about the
library book. Right. Yeah, I just got that for Christmas.
And she bought a different Schindler house, which I actually helped her find, which is the Callis house, and they just moved into that like a month ago.
Okay.
So she just basically moved to a bigger Schindler house. And I don't remember who bought the Roth house, but yeah, it's a great house. It's not the biggest house, so I think they were happy to have a little more space.
A little more room.
Their
now,
kid kind of was getting
when
older.
I saw you last, we walked around a Soriano house in Silverlake that I think you were going to be working on.
Yes, well, that is the Lippitt's house is a Soriano house that is an early house and kind of influenced by a streamlined modern aesthetic. So the whole thing looks a little bit like a boat with it even has kind of a perimeter deck with a little railing on it that reads
like a little cruise
modernist
ship.
Yes, it's a little cruise ship at the top of a promontory in Silverlake. And my clients, first I was going to add to that house, but I was going to do it not below ground, but like on the hill below the house and kind of tying into it underground. But in the end, they ended up buying this great lot right next door to them down the hill a little bit on its own promontory. And so I'm almost finished right now with a new house that is going to be sort of like their main house, and they're going to keep the Lippitt's house as a guest house. And we're connecting the landscape. But what's lovely is that, in a way, the language of the Lippitt's house, which is very much about a kind of simple shaped object, informed how we thought about the new house. the object in that case is a sort of stepped roof line that is sort of related to the hillside stepping down. And so that becomes like a little kind of white shape on the hillside, and it sort of floats above this really big open indoor-outdoor, some concrete walls, but mostly glass kind of living area and bedrooms below. Together, it'll be like a compound.
Is the main house like down the hill from the Lippett's house?
Down the hill, yeah. So it doesn't interfere with the views at all of the Lippett's house, which has this great view. That is all intact, and our house that's kind of why it steps down the hill. It kind of stays out of you see the roof of it from. You see a little bit of the roof of it from the Lippett's house, but their front yards kind of connect through like a series of landscaped stairs, so you can kind of use all the outdoor space for both of them together.
Now, there's one other set of houses I want to ask you about, and we missed seeing these last month at Modernism Week, and that's the Bode houses in Palm Springs. They look so cool. Oh,
thank you. Well, you wouldn't be able to see them, had you looked for them, because they aren't actually built yet.
Oh, well, there you go. That's why we missed them.
Mystery solved.
No, in Palm Springs, we have a project that we're hoping will start construction sometime soon. We have a permit for it, but it's this series of 14 houses that are really all together one hotel, and it's a new typological idea where it takes that idea of renting an Airbnb or something in Palm Springs, as people do, but makes it into a series of houses that you could rent, like a 5-bedroom house or a 6-bedroom house. And they have individual swimming pools, sometimes on the roof. They also have like there's a restaurant on the property and a big shared pool and a kind of communal space in between that you could technically rent all of the houses and have like a big wedding there. But it's also in downtown Palm Springs, so it's kind of walking distance.
Where is it exactly?
It's on Indian Canyon, right near the Palm Springs Museum's architecture outpost, which is this beautiful glass former bank building.
Oh, sure. Really right downtown.
Yeah, so it's like a block away from that. And the idea is really, it's a little bit taking that idea of a walkable, like you don't have to have a car because you kind of get around town. If you're going to go to like one of the festivals, you can kind of do that as a carpool thing. Like it sort of allows more people to share together. Like, if you want to rent it with a few friends, you get the 5 or 6 bedroom house and you kind of are both downtown, but also have the advantages of a, communal shared house.
When is it going to be finished, do you think?
Well, I think it just depends on financing and construction. That it's more back in the hands of the owners who are developers. And as far as we know, it's sort of on hold. So it's really just like a new kind of hotel concept.
Okay.
Kind of like, like you have communal living thingies. This is like a Airbnb type of hotel.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's not going to be cheap. I can tell that already.
I think it will be, though, if you went with, imagine if you share 6 bedrooms amongst 6 couples for the cost of like more than one hotel room, but I'm sure it won't be anything like the cost of 6 hotel rooms.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's actually kind of a good which is sort of why people share, do a big house share as well.
Yeah, with a film festival out there, with Modernism Week, Coachella, a lot of people are coming out there and spending a week.
Yes, exactly. No, it's kind of this group destination in a way now. Like so many of the events there have to do with like large groups of people doing something together. It's kind of neat. Palm Springs just keeps changing and growing over the years I've been living in this area. It's really fun to see the city, like, it's just so alive these days. It's really nice. I remember doing a guide to Albert Frey's houses in, like, the 80s or something for a newsletter, maybe the 90s that I was working on. And now that they're so celebrated and, like, that path is well-traveled and people really even know about the architects, it's just very exciting.
You provide a very wide range of services than most architects. For example, you do work in brand identity, right?
I do some work in brand identity, usually only if it's an architecture project I'm doing as well. But I'm interested in how architecture is part of the story behind anything commercial, that if they're going to go to the trouble of hiring like a real, design architect such as our firm, then we want to make sure that the rest of the graphics and even sometimes the name and all that are kind of part of a bigger concept, because it is kind of a bigger immersive context. And so we'll do naming, we'll do logos. Sometimes there's some parts of the building itself that become how the brand is recognized.
Well, if you ever get bored, we need some brand identity badly. Our last campaign is so old, it was designed by Pebbles Flintstone, who most people don't know went on to a fascinating career in marketing and graphic design.
Along with Bam Bam?
No, she and Bam Bam broke up.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah, but
Pebbles, I haven't thought about her in a while.
yeah,
I'm glad
she
she's
does
out
our
there
website
thumping the
and
pavement.
yeah. Hey, so what's on your travel list of buildings to visit around the world?
Oh my gosh, I just went to see the coolest library in Mexico City by Alberto Calaj. It's I have no idea what it's called right now because it's got a long name, but it is crazy cool. It looks like, I don't know what it looks like. It looks like you're inside like the animal in the movie Aliens, like the first one, but not in a bad way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
No eggs.
No eggs. No, it's just it's amazing. It's this huge public space in like kind of like a poor neighborhood in Mexico City. Mexico City in general is just the most awesome place to visit, and everybody I know in LA is kind of half thinking about moving there because it's just so exciting and there's so much cool art going on and the buildings are so great and it's just so interesting. But that's a new building that was built, I think, as a kind of a big public amenity, and it serves, a huge public audience, but it's also just really remarkable when you look at like something like some of the more historic libraries that we've seen. Well, I guess one of the big buildings I also really like to visit is in Seattle, right near the amazing Pike Street Market, is that Seattle library that Rem Koolhaas built recently.
Oh, yeah.
And that's just such a great icon of sort of late 20th century architecture. It's really, if you haven't been there, it's a must see.
That's a great building.
Elevators up in there, and it's
And we were just in Phoenix at Will Bruder's Central Library.
That's right.
I love that place.
Yeah.
I was just there. I was actually there. Taliesin West would be the other big, loves. I mean, I'm sure that your audience has heard of that. It's not been there, but that is such a great. You go stay at the Biltmore in the old Frank Lloyd Wright section of the hotel. It's like such a great weekend, and then you go see Taliesin for a day, and it's just remarkable. They have a wonderful architecture school there too, which is kind of independent of the foundation that runs the site as a museum, and that school is really exciting these days. It's kind of
we just
small.
had on the former dean of the school as our guest, Victor City.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, the new guy is this guy Aaron Betsky, who used to teach at SciArc, I think, and was in LA, and they ran a really interesting design school in Holland for a while, and he's bringing in different kinds of young teachers and students, and that's a place where students get to build their own homes while they're in the course of their studies. They kind of live out in the desert in these shelters that they build themselves, and it's really interesting, kind of alternative form of architecture school to some of the more standard product.
Yeah, it's very, very organic. It's kind of build your own everything.
Yeah, but I have to say that I just think Taliesin West as a complex, as an architectural vision is so impressive. When I go there, you just forget how much influence Wright in that building in particular had on a lot of Western modernism, and how many, like, that's where John Lautner came out of there. A couple of the really great maverick architects from Chicago went there.
Oh, sure. And it's a great place to visit. It's in excellent shape.
Yeah, and there's just so much to see, between the buildings, but also the shelters and stuff. It's remarkable. I will say, if I'm allowed to have a pet peeve, I do take issue. Okay, well, the one thing, it's a good location to say it because I was going to write them a letter, but I feel like when you take the official tour of Taliesin, it's a little bit heavy on Frank Lloyd Wright-y gossip that makes it almost sound like you didn't care as an architect about some of the core principles of architecture, shelter and whatever. And actually, I think that does it a little bit of a disservice because I think the visionary architecture part can also go hand in hand with being a responsible architect, and we want people to embrace new ideas about architecture and modernism and not think of it as just some crazy person inflicting it on people. So that was my peeve.
Well, Barbara, you should put this in your TripAdvisor review.
Oh, I should do that.
Yeah.
Your Yelp review.
There you go. Now you know. Yeah,
One woman
you're
focus group speaks up.
That's how you do it these days.
That's a good idea. Well, I was going to just actually call the people over there and be like, I'd like to talk to you about this, but whatever. Because you go to Falling Water and it's completely different. They have a much more, the way that they describe the building and the process is much more kind of architectural and informative, I think. But whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Hey, I wanted to get your opinion on something. You've said in an article I read about you that you don't like to be too architect-y or conformist. So what's passé now? What's hit its peak? Like, are granite countertops finally out? Are concrete floors?
They haven't been in for years.
Okay, well, I'm just trying to check in with where the trends are.
Yeah, we don't get much out here in North Carolina. Formica.
Well, there's some cool stuff getting built out there. Well, I don't know. It's an interesting time because there's a bit of a free for all. There's less. It's less prescriptive, I would say. What is new and what is old. There, you see kind of different generations collapsing their influences into different kinds of things. Like more people are suddenly interested in Mediterranean stuff again now, which I hadn't heard about for 20 years. But although when I first arrived in LA, that was like what most civilians were interested in. Nobody cared about modernism then. Now people are like, well, everything's modern, so now I'm interested in this other thing. But I would say in my neck of the woods, horizontal slat fencing maybe kind of come and gone as a just overly ubiquitous trend.
Okay. We'll let the president know not to do the wall that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, God.
Sorry.
That's good. I hate glass garage doors, but I have for a long time. I call those Coke dealer modern.
Glass garage
I don't
doors?
know this.
Like people have them and they think it looks modern. They have kind of like that sandblasted type of glass and like a metal garage door, and they put it on their garage.
So you can't really see in, but it's sort of translucent?
No. Yeah, it just seems kind of cheesy.
Now I want one.
Anyhow.
Thanks.
Well, that's fine. You can also open up shop then.
That's right. Well, Barbara, this has been great. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. It was so great to meet you last summer, and we'll be back out there again this year doing another party.
Well, it's so fun talking to you guys, and I hope that LA becomes a regular part of your missionary tour. But anyway, I hope that LA becomes a regular part of your visits around the U.S., your circuit, exactly.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Angela Roll, your special agent for Modernist houses. 919-995-0550. Okay, take us home, Tom.
Visit USModernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover 7,000 classic modernist houses, and access 2.5 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. Cindy Stratton, not her real name, is in Witless protection now.
Witless?
Yes. She doesn't know anything about it. It's an undisclosed location near Trader Joe's, but don't tell her. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive, a nonprofit educational organization for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Gild. I'll be back in 2 weeks with George and with all those shows from Palm Springs coming soon on U.S. Modernist Radio.